It's possible to have the truth in your head, be able to teach it, and it not transform you. If you don't think so, look at Jesus' encounters with the guys who were the pillars of truth during his time, in his ministry, the Pharisees. Which, by the way, were not religious guys, most of them. Most of them were religious in the sense of their devotion to the teachings but they were middle-class businessmen, small business owners and mid-level management and guys along those lines. It wasn't a huge group. There were like 5,000 or 6,000 of them. But they're often coming into contact with Jesus because Jesus is doing things that don't fit their paradigm. But these guys knew the truth of the Bible, Old Testament at that time, better than everybody else. There's a reason why in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, if any of you wants to get into heaven, you got to be more righteous than these guys, because everybody thought they were the pillars of righteousness. And so they knew the truth, taught the truth, were defenders and pillars of truth, but they missed the one who is the truth. Jesus said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the truth. But they knew all these true things. And he says to them at one point, you think because you know the scriptures that you have eternal life. You don't. And then there's these weird confrontations continually where they come to him and he's violating some truth, usually from their oral tradition, which is a way for them to try and apply the things that are clearly stated in the Bible, which goes beyond the Bible usually. And Jesus then always does the opposite of what you would expect. He is the inventor of the Jesus juke. There's one story, if you want to read the whole thing, it's in Mark chapter 7, where they're mad because the disciples haven't washed their hands. And it's not like your mom got mad at you for not washing your hands before dinner. It's cleanliness because of godliness, the way they taught, because you were unclean if you didn't do ceremonial washing of your hands, and plates and bowls and cups and all kinds of things. The problem was they were ignoring their hearts. And so they come in and they say to the disciples about Jesus, what do you're not washing your hands? And like they're basically saying God's offended. The irony for us as we read this is that we know that Jesus is God in the flesh. So if I were Peter in that situation, I had actually realized that, I'd be like, well, we're eating with God and he doesn't seem upset. And if he's not upset, I guess we're good. But they say to Jesus, why do your disciples not wash their hands before they eat? Because that's the tradition, that's the teaching. And then Jesus, you ever watch a reel where like Ben Shapiro or somebody really smart is doing some college speech and like some kid gets up who hasn't washed their hair in like 6 months and says, here's why you're wrong. And then he's like, boom. And you're like, wow, roasted. That's essentially what happens in this story. He's like, why aren't your disciples washing their hands, Jesus? And Jesus is like, because poop makes you dirty, not the food you eat. That's what he says. Read it, Mark chapter 7. He says it's not what goes into you that makes you unclean, and he declares all foods clean there, Mark tells us in parentheses. And he says, but it's what comes out of you. And so, if you don't think that Jesus said it, don't email the church, email Jesus. It's in there, Mark 7, read the thing. Here's what happens. He says that, the boom roasted moment for the Pharisees. It says in verse 15 of Mark chapter 7, nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. And then verse 17, after he left the crowd, so now we're in a more private environment, and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. Are you so dull? Are you really that stupid? Jesus said. I wonder if his veins were popping out like my coach's. Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. And saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart. What's on the inside eventually does come out, is what he says next. It's in a person's heart, evil thoughts, sexual morality, theft, murder, adultery. This is the bile, the fecal matter. This is based on what's already in your heart. This comes out: malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils, and there's more that could be listed, from inside defile a person. But most people, even when those things come out, say, well, that's not me. Blind spot. See, the true darkness in our soul is scarier than the darkness that's out there that we wish we could control. The darkness in our soul something most of us don't realize or want to deal with. Or we're so scared that if we let it be known, others will reject us. Blind spots.